Let me be clear about something, right from the start. I'm not the villain in this story. If you're looking for a monster, you'll have to look elsewhere. What I did for a reason, a cold, hard medical reason, and honestly, I still believe I was the only one being mature about it. My name is Corinne. I was 29 when the world tilted on its axis. It happened in a sterile room that smelled of antiseptic and quiet despair. The doctor, a woman with kind eyes and a brutally direct vocabulary, laid out the facts like they were pieces on a chessboard. She used words like scarring and premature failure. They were abstract concepts until she gathered them into one gut-wrenching sentence. "I'm sorry, Corinne," she said, her kind eyes offering no comfort at all. "You won't be able to conceive. Not ever. Ever." It's a funny word. So final. It slams a door so loudly you can't hear anything else for a while. I sat there, the crinkling paper on the examination table the only sound in the room, and I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just grief. It was a clarification. A terrible, clarifying light. All my life, intimacy had been implicitly tied to this grand biological purpose. It's the engine of creation, the very thing that turns two people into a family. It was a duty, my mother had always implied. The quiet price of a stable home. It's what you do. It's the point. And if you take the point away, what are you left with? Just motion. An act. A performance I had been staging for years, even before I met my husband Nolan. I'd been going through the motions because that's what was expected in a marriage. It's the currency of affection, the proof of love. But now, I had a real reason to stop pretending. A medical hall pass. A doctor's note excusing me from the performance for the rest of my life. Nolan was at work when I got home. He works in logistics. I've never fully understood what that entails, something about supply chains and moving things from one place to another. All I knew was that it made him tired. He'd come home every evening with a weariness in his bones, his shoulders slumped. I figured this news, my decision, would actually be a relief for him. No more pressure, no more expectations. We could finally move past the shallow, physical part of our relationship and build something deeper, something real. I thought I was being incredibly mature. He walked in around 6, smelling faintly of cardboard and diesel. He kissed the top of my head and asked what was for dinner. I didn't ease into it. I've always preferred directness. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. He sat down at our small kitchen table, his brow furrowed with that familiar, tired concern. "I got the test results back," I began. I told him everything the doctor said, watching his face for a reaction. It went blank, like a canvas wiped clean. He didn't seem to understand the words. "We're not doing that anymore," I said, finishing my pronouncement. "I can't have kids, Nolan, so there's no point." The blankness on his face was replaced by a frantic confusion. "What? What do you mean, not doing that anymore?" "Intimacy," I said, as if explaining a simple concept to a child. "It's off the table." He just stared at me. "Corinne, what did the doctor say? Exactly? Can we get a second opinion? We could look into adoption. There are so many options." I cut him off. "I'm not interested in playing house with someone else's child. This is my reality now, and it changes things." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture he always made when he was stressed. "It doesn't have to change everything. Intimacy isn't just about making babies. It's about us. It's about connection. All that stuff. That mushy stuff, as I'd always thought of it. The things people said to romanticize a biological imperative. I was tired of pretending it meant more than it did. "If you really loved me," I said, my voice dropping, becoming a tool I knew how to use, "this wouldn't be a problem. Real love isn't about physical things. That's shallow." The look on his face was like I'd struck him. But I stood my ground. This was my body, my medical diagnosis, my decision. I explained that to him, calmly. This was a chance for our relationship to evolve, to become something stronger, based on a true emotional connection. If he couldn't handle that, if he wasn't willing to grow with me, then maybe he wasn't the man I thought he was. I watched him struggle to find the words, to piece together the new rules of our marriage that I had just laid out. And a small, dark part of me, a part I wouldn't admit to anyone, kind of enjoyed it. For years, I had accommodated his needs, his schedule, his desires. Now, it was time for him to accommodate mine. this wasn't an ending, I told myself. It was a new, more profound beginning. He just couldn't see it yet. 2 years. For 2 solid years, our home became a quiet battlefield. The main offensive was over, but a grueling siege had begun. Nolan, to his credit, was persistent. He didn't shout or make demands. His tactics were quieter, more insidious. He'd leave a brochure for a couples counselor on the kitchen counter. He'd casually mention an article he read about new fertility treatments. He was always gentle, always understanding, which was somehow more infuriating than open anger would have been. He was trying to manage me, but I had developed my own defense strategies. I became a master of deflection, an expert in emotional warfare. Every time he tried to bring it up, always starting with a soft, "Honey, I've been thinking," I would shut it down before he could finish. Sometimes, the tears were the most effective weapon. His face would be earnest, his voice pleading, and I would just let my eyes well up. "How can you keep pressuring me like this?" I'd whisper, my voice cracking. "Don't you understand how broken I feel? Every time you bring it up, you're just reminding me that I'm defective." It worked like a charm. He would immediately retreat, filled with guilt, apologizing for being insensitive. Other times, I used anger. A sudden, sharp fury that would catch him off guard. "I can't believe we're talking about this again. I have made my decision." I'd shout, before storming out of the room and slamming a door. The ensuing silence would be his punishment, a heavy blanket of his own perceived failure to be a supportive husband. My favorite, though, was flipping it back on him. It was a move of pure strategic genius. He'd be in the middle of a carefully rehearsed speech about our needs as a couple, and I would cut in, my voice laced with ice. "So, my medical condition isn't enough for you? You need me to be physically available even though I can't give you children? What kind of man does that make you, Nolan?" That one always stopped him cold. It painted him as a shallow, sex-obsessed predator, and me as his fragile, long-suffering victim. It was perfect. Between us, a part of me began to enjoy the control. For the first time in our relationship, I was the one setting the boundaries. I was the one who got to say no and have it mean something. Do you know how rare that is? To have a reason so unimpeachable, a medical diagnosis, that it couldn't be argued with? It was liberating. But then he started to change in ways that genuinely ticked me off. He wasn't fighting anymore. He was retreating. He'd come home from work and barely speak. He'd make his own dinner, a sandwich eaten over the sink, and then disappear into the den to watch television by himself. He stopped telling me about his day. The little gestures vanished. No more surprise takeout from my favorite Thai place. No more picking up the expensive coffee I liked. When I'd try to cuddle with him on the sofa, just to show him I still loved him in other ways, he'd stiffen. He wouldn't push me away, not exactly, but his body would become rigid, unresponsive. It was a passive-aggressive punishment for my boundaries, and it was deeply cruel. "Why are you being so cold?" I'd ask him, my voice full of hurt. "I'm still your wife. I still love you." "I'm just tired from work," he'd mumble, his eyes fixed on the television. Total bullshit. He was trying to make me feel guilty, to manipulate me into giving in. It was so immature. Here I was, trying to elevate our marriage into something deeper, a partnership of souls, and he was stuck pouting because he wasn't getting his way. I figured he'd come around eventually. He just needed more time to adjust, to see the wisdom in my decision. I was sure of it. The letter appeared on a Tuesday. It was the culmination of his latest strategy, seeing a therapist by himself. A betrayal, if you ask me. Going to a stranger to complain about me behind my back. How mature. He handed it to me when he got home from work. He didn't say anything, just placed the thick, cream-colored envelope on the table in front of me. His hand was trembling slightly. The letter itself was a masterpiece of passive aggression, probably co-written by his new therapist. It was all carefully worded and diplomatic. It started by saying he loved me, that he respected my struggle, but that our marriage was falling apart. He wrote about the silence in the house, the emotional chasm that had opened between us. It was a plea, a desperate, pathetic plea. Could we please try counseling together? Would I at least consider seeing a new specialist? It ended with some garbage about how he wanted to fight for our relationship, but he needed to know I was willing to fight too. Reading it made me see red. First, the audacity to put this all in writing, like some kind of business proposal for my affection. Second, the manipulation of it all, framing it as though I was the one who wasn't fighting. I was fighting every day, fighting for my own autonomy, fighting to protect myself, fighting to establish healthy boundaries. But apparently, that didn't count. The underlying message was the most insulting part. My decision wasn't good enough. I needed to be fixed. I needed to be changed to make him happy. After 2 years of him wearing me down with the same requests, here it was again, just dressed up in fancy paper. I didn't even think. I stood up, walked to the kitchen junk drawer, and pulled out a red Sharpie. The cap came off with a satisfying squeak. I marched back to the table where he was sitting, watching me with wide, hopeful eyes, and I scrawled across his precious, therapist-approved letter in big, angry letters. Go get it elsewhere because you're not getting it from me. I didn't just write it. I pressed down hard, the felt tip tearing at the paper. Then, I threw it at him. It fluttered and landed on the table between us, a declaration of war. I turned and walked out, grabbing my car keys on the way. I drove for hours, the fury burning in my chest. Honestly, part of me was just calling his bluff. Nolan wasn't the type to actually do something like that. He was a rule follower, a good guy. He was too concerned with appearances. I figured this grand, dramatic gesture would finally make him realize how serious I was. It would shock him into silence. He would finally stop bringing it up. When I got home late that night, the house was dark except for a single light in the kitchen. He was sitting right where I'd left him, at the table. The letter was in front of him. He looked up at me as I walked in, his face calm, almost serene. It was unnerving. Okay, he said. Just like that. Okay, like he was agreeing to take out the trash. What do you mean, okay? I asked, my voice sharp. He looked down at the letter, then back up at me. His eyes were clear, and for the first time in 2 years, they held no trace of pleading. You've made your position clear, he said, his voice even, and you've given me permission to handle my needs elsewhere, so that's what I'm going to do. I laughed. A short, incredulous bark. You're not serious. He didn't laugh back. He just carefully folded the letter, the red ink facing inward, and slid it into his wallet. I'm completely serious, Corinne. You've told me for 2 years that this is how you want our marriage to be. You just put it in writing. So now I know where we stand. This wasn't the Nolan I knew. The Nolan I knew apologized for leaving dishes in the sink. This man was a stranger, a calm, collected stranger, who was looking at me like he was finally seeing me clearly. It honestly creeped me out. The power dynamic had shifted in an instant, and I felt a tremor of fear. I had just handed him a weapon, and I had a terrible feeling he was actually going to use it. The days that followed were unsettling. The oppressive tension in our house was replaced by an eerie calm. Nolan stopped being sullen and withdrawn. Instead, he seemed lighter. He whistled while making his coffee in the morning. He spoke to me politely, asking about my day, but in the detached way you'd speak to a roommate. The fight was gone, and I hated it. I tried to backtrack, to soften the blow of what I'd written. You know, I was just frustrated the other night, I said, attempting a casual tone. I didn't mean it literally. He was reading the paper and didn't even look up. It seemed pretty literal to me, he said, taking a sip of his coffee. You even underlined elsewhere. Had I? I couldn't remember. I'd been so blinded by rage. He told me his therapist had helped him understand something, that some problems can't be solved if only one person is willing to work on them. Apparently, I had made it abundantly clear I wasn't willing to work on this one, so he was going to solve it his own way. I spent the next few weeks waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for him to break down and apologize. But he didn't. I found out 3 months later. On a Saturday, I was picking up his work shirts from the dry cleaners, a task I still did out of habit. The woman behind the counter, a chatty older lady named Marge, smiled at me sympathetically. It's so nice to see Mr. Nolan smiling again, she said while ringing me up. That new friend of his seems to be doing him a world of good. It's lovely that he's found someone. The plastic bags crinkled in my hand. What new friend? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Marge's face fell. She started stammering, backtracking, but the damage was done. The car ride home was a blur of betrayal and white-hot fury. I confronted him the second he walked in the door. I didn't even let him put his keys down. He didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. He just looked at me with that same unnerving calm and asked, "Do you want to know details or would you prefer to keep things general?" The casual way he said it made me want to scream. "You're cheating on me," I said, the words tasting like poison. He walked over to the hook where he kept his jacket, reached into the pocket, and pulled out his wallet. From it, he produced my letter. It was folded and worn now, the creases soft from being carried around for months. He held it up. "You told me to get it elsewhere," he said, his voice flat. "This is elsewhere." "That's not what I meant," I shrieked, the tears finally coming, hot and frustrated. "Then what did you mean, Corinne?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Because I asked you to clarify that night, and you didn't. You just let me believe it." "I meant you should stop bothering me about it," I sobbed. "Not actually go and sleep with other people." He just stared at me for a long moment, like I was speaking a foreign language he was trying to decipher. Then he delivered the blow that knocked all the air out of my lungs. "So," he said slowly, his voice devoid of emotion, "you wanted me to be celibate for the rest of my life and never bring it up again?" When he put it like that, it sounded unreasonable. But that wasn't the point. The point was the betrayal. The point was that he was supposed to choose me over his needs, over everything. That's what marriage meant. "You have to end it," I demanded through my tears. "End it right now, and I promise we can try counseling together. I'm willing to compromise now." "Oh?" He looked at me, a flicker of something, maybe sadness, in his eyes. Then he asked the most infuriating question. "What would be the goal of the counseling?" "To communicate, to work through our problems, to get you to change your mind about physical intimacy," he pressed. "No," I snapped. "Counseling is about working on our issues, not about me changing my fundamental position on something medical." "So, counseling to help us both accept a sexless marriage?" he asked. "If that's what it takes, yes." He was quiet for a long time, just looking at me. It felt like he was seeing every lie I'd ever told myself. "I don't think I can do that, Corinne," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't think I want to." The months that followed were a special kind of hell. Nolan was living a double life, and he wasn't even trying to hide it. He was a ghost in our home, a polite tenant who paid his half of the bills. He'd get text messages and answer them right in front of me, a small, private smile on his face. Some nights he'd come home late, smelling of a different soap, his hair still damp from a shower taken somewhere else. I tried everything. I cried. I screamed. I threatened to leave. I tried being sweet, reminding him of all the good times we'd had, pulling out old photo albums. Nothing worked. He moved through my emotional storms with the calm detachment of a meteorologist watching a hurricane on a radar screen. He was in the eye of the storm, untouched. "This is destroying our marriage," I would scream at him, my voice raw. And he would reply, his voice maddeningly level, "Our marriage was already destroyed, Corinne. This is just me refusing to be miserable while we figure out what comes next." What comes next? He was already thinking about an exit. Our friends, the ones we'd shared for years, started picking sides. I was shocked and horrified by how many of them sided with him. Apparently, he had been more open about our situation than I realized. They knew about my decision. They knew about the letter. They saw him as the victim, a man who had been patiently suffering for years. My own sister told me, during a tense phone call, "Corinne, maybe you should just let him go. You're torturing both of you." Torturing him? I was the one being cheated on. I was the one whose husband was running around with some other woman while I sat at home trying to hold our life together. The absolute worst was when I found out who she was. I did some digging, which wasn't hard. Her name was Ayla. She went to his gym. Divorced, no kids, worked in customer service, or something equally basic. She was everything I wasn't. Available, uncomplicated, willing. A blank slate he could project all his simple desires onto. When I confronted him with her name, he said something that still makes me angry just thinking about it. "She doesn't make me feel broken for having normal needs." Normal needs. As if my medical condition was abnormal. As if my decision was invalid. As if I was the broken one. I started watching her social media. It was an obsession, a form of self-flagellation. She wasn't even prettier than me. Just softer, younger, and clearly more desperate. The kind of woman who'd happily settle for being someone's side piece just to have a man around. But seeing the pictures she posted because she had no shame apparently made my stomach clench. Pictures of them hiking, he'd always told me his knees were too bad for that. Pictures of them at a farmer's market, something he'd always called a waste of a Saturday. Pictures of them just sitting on a couch, laughing. Nolan looked different in those pictures. He looked relaxed. He looked happy. The constant, weary tension that had been etched into his face for years was just gone. He looked like the man I'd first met, before life had worn him down. Before I had worn him down. That's when I knew I was losing him for good. I had to do something drastic. I gave him one final ultimatum. It's me or her, Nolan. This halfway situation is over. End it with her, and I swear we will commit to counseling and figure this out. Arwen. His response was weary, practiced. What's the point, Corinne? What is the point of counseling if you've already decided that physical intimacy is off the table forever? We can find other ways to connect, I pleaded, hearing the desperation in my own voice. Other ways to be intimate. He just shook his head, a look of profound sadness on his face. Corinne, I don't want to learn how to be okay with being celibate for the rest of my life. I want to be with someone who actually wants me. That stung. I did want him, just not in that one specific way. But apparently, that was the only way that mattered. He filed for divorce 3 weeks later. The papers were delivered by a courier. I couldn't believe it. After everything we'd built, he was throwing it all away for some gym bunny he'd known for a few months. It just proved everything I'd always suspected about men. Their loyalty is only as deep as their most basic desires. The divorce was nasty, not in a screaming, throwing dishes way, but in a cold, clinical, soul-crushing way. Nolan had documentation for everything. My letter, of course, was Exhibit A. But he also had records of his therapy sessions, notes about how our sexless marriage was affecting his mental health, emails where he'd begged me to try counseling. He painted a picture of a reasonable man driven to desperation by an unreasonable withholding wife. He made me look like the villain. My own family started to buckle under the weight of his evidence. My mother, after a long, difficult conversation, finally asked me the question that broke my heart. Honey, what did you expect him to do? If you weren't willing to be a wife to him in all the ways that mattered. Even she was taking his side. I lost most of our mutual friends. They all saw Nolan as some kind of saint who had tried everything to save our marriage while I was the stubborn, rigid one who refused to compromise. Never mind that I was the one dealing with a life-altering medical condition. Never mind that I was the one who got cheated on. The narrative had been written, and I had been cast as the antagonist. The final insult came a few months after the divorce was finalized. I saw it on Facebook. A picture of Nolan and Ayla standing in front of a house with a sold sign. They had moved in together. They weren't just dating. They were building a life. The life he was supposed to build with me. She posted pictures of them constantly. Grocery shopping, watching movies on a new sofa, going out to dinner with our old friends. What really got me was seeing how confident he looked. The man I'd been married to was quiet and tired, always walking on eggshells. This version of him was laughing, social, vibrant. He looked like a man who had been set free, a man I barely recognized. I'm living alone in our old apartment now. It feels too big, too quiet. The silence is no longer a weapon I wield, it's a prison. And honestly, I'm done trying to make everyone understand my side. Nolan chose immediate physical gratification over building something deeper with me. Our friends chose to support the cheater over the wife who was dealing with a medical issue. My family chose to blame me, instead of supporting me through a difficult time. Fine. I don't need any of them. I made a reasonable decision based on my medical reality. I am not apologizing for having boundaries. If Nolan was too shallow to appreciate the profound platonic love we could have had together, that's his loss, not mine. If this new woman makes him happy by giving him everything he wants without any challenges or depth, then good for them. I hope they're very happy in their superficial little relationship. I'm sure it'll last forever, built as it is on such a solid foundation of, she gives me what I want, when I want it. A truly mature basis for a life partnership. As for me, I'm focusing on myself now. I don't need someone who can't handle a real relationship with real challenges. I am better off alone than with someone who would throw away years of history the moment things got complicated. Everyone else can think whatever they want. They can read his letters and listen to his side of the story. They weren't there. They don't know. but I do. I know what really happened. And I know I did nothing wrong.